Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 22 of Dark Histories. I'm Ben, and I hope this finds everyone in good spirits after a fantastic Halloween. I hope you enjoyed the bonus episode as much as I enjoyed writing it as well. That was really good fun. This week, we're going to be taking a look at some more tales of demonic possession and witchcraft from 1688. This time, however, it's going to be on American soil. But before we get to that, as usual, I just want to thank the new patrons for their support. Those signed up last couple of weeks include Robin, Mike, Nathaniel, Courtney, Laura, Gavin and Hermione and Leslie. So thanks very much, guys. I know these kind of little shout-outs, they might seem a bit flat, but I genuinely appreciate all your support. So thanks so much for coming aboard. And I also want to give a quick mention that next month I'm going to be taking my sort of annual little break for a few weeks over Christmas. And during that time, I'll knock together a little Christmas campfire episode just like last year. So if you do have a creepy story that you'd like told in that episode, write into me via email at contact@darkhistories and I'll include it. And that was a fun kind of little bonus episode to do over on my Christmas break last year. So, hopefully you guys will bring the goods again this year. With that all said, let's get on with the episode. So Anne Glover and the Goodwin children. I think when we talk about this, or when I think about it, it's good to kind of split it up into two stories in a way. For the purpose of the discussion, it's kind of good to separate Anne Glover from the events. Because, let's just make it clear, Anne Glover clearly had nothing to do with it. She was obviously just an unfortunate victim of religious persecution and ignorance and bigotry. And I think it's fairly obvious. The fact that no one that dealt directly with her with any power could even speak Irish, and the way they speak about it, the way they speak about her talking Irish, you could see that just from the words they were using, how they looked down upon the fact that she was speaking Irish. It was so obvious that she was dealt with quite a bit of contempt, undoubtedly part of a Catholic minority in a Puritan stronghold. So you can see where the accusations of witchcraft have come from, really. Mather himself calls her at one point an idolatrous Roman Catholic. So I think it's fairly obvious that Anne Glover was really a very unfortunate victim of the whole story. I also doubt her confession on the way to being hung that there was a second person that Mather wouldn't name. I think he probably put that in there to cover himself because he knew that once they would hang her, nothing would stop because it had nothing to do with her. And I think he knew that. And I think he did it because otherwise, why would he suddenly have this bout of forethought to not name her? Why would he have this sudden, I shouldn't name her in case she gets done innocently? He didn't extend that privilege to Anne Glover at all. So I'm fairly sure that name, that the unnamed second suspect, I'm fairly sure that wasn't real and was just covering the fact that if the children didn't get better after she was hung, it wouldn't sort of come back to him as falsely accusing her or falsely condemning her to death. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. And the fact that he even says, I think he said there's the line, Goodwin had no proof that could have done her any hurt, but the hag had not power to deny her interest in the enchantment of the children. So he even says, they literally had nothing on her. And you can see in other accounts as well, so most of this comes from the same account, which is Cotton Mather. But there are other accounts. There's one from 1890, A History of New England by John A. Palfrey. And he calls her a poor washerwoman defending herself unskillfully in her foreign gibberish. It sort of shows everything about it, really, doesn't it? And all her blasphemous words and all the rest of it. Was it really truly blasphemous words, or was it just the fact that she was speaking Irish and they couldn't understand her? I think that was much more likely the truth of it. And I found it very interesting that they thought that her dolls might actually have been of Catholic saints rather than witchcraft tools. And they just kind of put two and two together and came up with 5. And I think they did that quite a lot with her, basically. I think, were the interpreters, okay, so how just and honest were they? Were they truly honest? Or were they just saying what Mather wanted to hear? Or, could they even speak Irish? He doesn't say where they were from or anything. He doesn't say who they were. So they were just 2 interpreters. Sounds to me like maybe they got some things right, because she said about, they asked her, have any that would stand with you? And she said that there was 4, her prince and 3 others, I think she said, or her prince and 4 others. But again, could her prince not have been God, and could the 4 others not have been saints? When you consider things like the dolls, if the dolls were dolls of saints, it doesn't take a great deal of imagination for an interpreter to have interpreted half of that sentence. Oh yeah, she says there's some people that stand with her, and there's 4 of them. But then instead of saying God and 4 saints, just saying the devil and 4 demons. It doesn't take a great leap of imagination. So I think that part of the story is really solved. Even in his own words, he almost condemns himself, really. It's very damning, his words about Anne Glover. I think when you look at it in retrospect, it's fairly obvious that she was just sort of very poor, unfortunate woman that got mixed up in a society that didn't tolerate outsiders or people, practicing a different religion. And that's about that. And then sort of to split it up and take a look at the second part of the story, which is the kind of demonic possession stuff. That's obviously where, so then we start looking, did this really happen or not? And was it, again, you look at the time, and it's very similar to the Nellie Butler haunting, and it all this not so different to, although that was many years in the future, it's not so different to the exorcism episode that we did with Anna Eklund. These religious people that wrote these texts with all the sort of documentation about what happened, they've got a kind of horse in the race, if you like. They're invested in proving that this stuff happened. And in this case, their horses, their belief in an immortal soul and the rest of it. So, at the time, again, it was sort of, again, they were pushing against materialism and things like that. So you always have to eye these texts, although they're old and they look impressive because they're written in this kind of oldie worldy English. You've always got to sort of view them through the eyes of the times, and the eyes of the time were that these people had a certain degree of vested interest in proving this stuff. So did it happen or did it not happen? It's tough because it's like wading through a sea of bull to try and work it out. I love the idea that it might be true, because again, some of the imagery, a bit like the Anna Eklund episode, and especially the Nellie Butler episode, that I as a kind of horror fan, I suppose, I like the imagery of possessions and things like that, especially when you're sort of going back to those kind of 1600s and stuff. You get that kind of settlers in the New World that are very kind, everything's a harsh environment, a harsh life, and then you got this on top, this kind of demonic possession on top. The imagery horror kind of, it just feeds into a fantastic horror kind of idea. But did it really happen? It's so hard to say yes or no, isn't it? Obviously, you've only got one account, and that one account is unfortunately heavily biased. But it's interesting, and I think it's certainly something. It's more likely that this happened than Anne Glover being the reason for it happening. Put it that way. I think, that's the Anne Glover section of it is done and dusted. She obviously had nothing to do with it, but whether it actually really happened is a whole different story. I'm inclined to believe that it probably didn't, but that's, again, I've sort of mentioned it a few times, and I don't want to sort of bring it in every time, but in these stories, it is an important aspect, is that I'm not a religious person. I never grew up religious, and it's not that I'm like a heavy atheist either. It's just that I just never grew up around the possibility of these things being true. So for me, it's quite easy in a sense to say, it probably didn't happen. But I'm very aware, probably better since starting this podcast, that there are people who grew up in a religious environment where these ideas of demons and devils are actually fairly, I wouldn't say run of the mill or normal, but they are part of their religious education, I suppose, and something that could very easily be true in their belief system. So, I don't want to just write it off. It shows a certain degree of imagination if it didn't, which I suppose is interesting as well. I found the ball and chain and the imagery of someone coming down a chimney to be quite interesting. Some of it you can sort of write off to be like almost fever dreams. Like, for example, when they're being stabbed with stomach pains and they felt someone come down the chimney and try to pull their bowels out with their bare hands, and you kind of think, well, okay, that's not too far from like a fever dream if say they were ill from some sort of viral infection or something. Perhaps they had these kind of fever dreams. But some of the other things, they talk about them flying over fences and across rooms. It's quite interesting. And probably the most interesting part of it that I found was the ball and chain around her foot that she could feel, and the descriptions of her getting bruises and cuts. They didn't see anything that would cause the bruises and cuts, but they saw the bruises and cuts happen. And probably the scariest one for me, the scariest sort of piece of imagery was when she was tried to be hung on the noose, and they found handprints and a thumb mark around her neck that stayed for some time after. I think they said, that's quite a terrifying image. And if that didn't happen, it seems like quite small details to put into a larger story. I don't personally have too much doubt, but I found that to be quite interesting, to insert these kind of smaller details. That's sort of it sort of makes you sometimes sort of step back and think, oh, okay, that's fairly unusual to include something like that when you look at their imagination on other things. Like, for example, there was her riding the horse around, and I can fairly sort of easily see that just being a child's imagination, but the things like the handprints around the neck suddenly being there when they weren't, and that leads you to sort of question it, and that's interesting. And it's I wonder, I suppose, I don't know if it could have happened or not. I say I'm inclined to be skeptical purely because of the authorship of the documentation being so easily attributed to someone's investment in it being true. But anyway, I thought it was an interesting story. I thought it was a good story, and one that I will look forward to the live stream and talking about for sure. I've also sort of noticed that I've more or less unwittingly set myself up for a trilogy here, because we had the initial episode to deal with witch trials, which were the English witch trials with the Witchfinder General, and then this episode obviously ties into that one, where you've got all of the immigration from East Anglia to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And now you've got like the setting up of Boston in this episode, and then obviously part 3 is going to have to be, all roads lead to Salem, basically. So I guess somewhere down the line, I'm going to have to sort of cap this off with an episode on Salem. So yeah, I guess that's what's going to be coming at some point down the line. And then that'll be a nice little kind of witch trial trilogy, I guess. But yeah, other than that, I thought it was an interesting story, and I love reading through the old texts. They get a bit heavy sometimes, and I appreciate that sometimes hearing someone read quotes from these old texts can be a bit of a heavy going. But I find novelty in them, and I think it's good to read them in their original sort of English, despite it being quite challenging at times. Just because I think it really adds to the story, and it adds to the history of it all, because that's the sort of stuff that really interests me, I guess. I did find it quite funny, that the quote about how she could only read good books, and one of the quotes was that presently she was so there's a quote that I thought was really funny that I didn't include, and it was, presently she was handled with intolerable torments, and that was how she was handled with intolerable torments when she was handed a good book, which was like a Bible or a religious text. And then he goes on to say, but when I showed her a jest book, as the Oxford jests or the Cambridge jests, she could read them without any disturbance. I quite loved that. It was like, despite everything that was happening, despite all of the demonic possessions and all the rest, like this lot, they weren't above a good joke, So the Oxford jests or the Cambridge jests, I'd love to have a look at those two books. I bet they're a right barrel of fun. Yeah, I can imagine them being incredibly cringy. But yeah, I thought that was great, that because you tend to get an impression in your mind of these settlers as being, hard life and struggle and challenge. It's very rewarding for some, and I'm very unfortunate for others, and all the rest. And you forget that in between all that was just real life. And you had these joke books, the Oxford jests and the Cambridge jests, these jest books, as they were called, like, and these were just people living normal lives. And that I found that, say, it's quite flippant in a way, but actually when you think about it, I don't know, I just found that fascinating. It's a nice reminder that despite these kind of imaginations you have of those colonial times, that people were also just living, normal lives, and they were regular people. And actually, despite being 300-400 years apart from us now, they were still reading lowbrow joke books. I like that. I thought it was good. So yeah, I mean, I think that's about it. I think when you look at Anne Glover, I think it's fairly obvious she had nothing to do with it. And I think, there's enough evidence just in her text that he wrote himself that kind of damns him as being a bit of a sort of ignorant bigot that was persecuting the Roman Catholic Irish old lady for no reason. And I think he clearly didn't have too much conviction on her guilt, but he just went with it anyway because, hey, she's an old hag. But there's a side of it, whether or not it's true or not, I don't know. And I think it's something I'll look forward to talking about in the live stream next week, I guess. Yeah, I think it's my own thoughts on it, that it probably didn't happen. But there's enough in there that makes me sort of think, oh, they're interesting little details. So yeah, I'll probably leave that there, and yeah, we'll move on. So let's do some emails. I need a jingle for this, really, don't I? Or do I? I don't know. Maybe in season 3, we'll see. I got an email from Sean. Sean suggests that Dark History's tagline was changed to "Where the facts are darker than fiction." He says that it's a bit flat. The whole "This is Dark Histories, where the facts are worse than fiction." Sean, I absolutely agree with you. And the funny thing about that was that at the time, I wasn't really something that I gave very much thought about. And I just kind of said it off my head. I was recording the first episode. Welcome to Dark Histories, where the facts are worse than fiction. And it's basically ended up being stuck ever since. And at this point, I'm kind of a bit of afraid to change it, I guess, because it's become the kind of, the end of all the kind of intros. But, I do agree with you. It is a bit flat. And I think something like "Where the facts are darker than fiction" might be a little bit more interesting. Season 3 is coming up again, like I say, so it's going to be starting in the new year. So it might be something that I can adopt going forward. But thanks very much for your emails, and I do appreciate your suggestions and your kind words as well. I got an email from Amanda who provided me with a link of a property website, and it had a ton of pictures of the house from the Spider-Man of Denver episode, including loads of like interior photos and things like that. So thanks so much for that link, Amanda. I did show the pictures off a little on the live stream, and obviously I gave so that people give Amanda credit for that. But I just wanted to say thank you, really, just for sending that in. It was really interesting. I hadn't seen those pictures, actually. They were kind of modern day pictures of the house, but it was still interesting. And I'll try to get that link out. Perhaps I'll do it on Discord, would be the best way to kind of spit that out, so that people can kind of have a look as well. So yeah, thanks very much, Amanda. And I also got a fantastic email from Rory, which is really long, and I'm not going to read it now, because it was really great. But it's exactly the sort of thing I mentioned earlier at the start of this episode that I would love to receive for the Christmas campfire special. So yeah, Rory, I'll get in touch with you about it and see if you're all right with that being included in the Christmas campfire episode. But Rory also wrote, your podcast, aside from being a labour of love that clearly shows through in the content and delivery, takes the most magical adventure-filled days of my life, and I'm supporting your work by sharing it with as many people as possible. Cheers, Rory. That really does help, actually. I'll probably at some point send along some buffalo wing sauces that you wouldn't be able to get your hands on over there. Perhaps in exchange, I could get you to send me some brown sauce, which I also miss. Yeah, absolutely, Rory. Definitely. I'm up for some sauce trading. We'll do a bit of a exchange on that. I'm 100% behind sharing the love for a bit of brown sauce. So yeah, definitely. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do so. contact@darkhistories.com. I do my best to respond to everyone sort of personally that does contact me through emails. It can take a little while because I usually do my kind of email admin work during my lunch breaks at work. So, if you haven't heard from me yet, rest assured I will get back to you as soon as I read it, basically. So yeah, you can either say get in touch with me, contact@darkhistories.com, that's the email, or we're on social media everywhere. Twitter @darkhistories, Facebook @darkhistories podcast, Instagram is dark_histories, or you can just go to darkhistories.com and all of the social links are there, as well as a link to our Discord, which is a really cool little community we've got going. If you want to come over to the Discord, have a chat, it's really a great place. Everyone's really friendly. It's useful because it's where we arrange for all of the live streams. So, if you want to be on the live stream, or if you want to just know what's going on with the live stream, it's quite a useful place, even if that's all you do. But it's a really nice little group, and everyone there has a nice time sort of writing and talking to each other about, similar topics for the show, but also just all sorts. We've got like a film and documentary recommendations thread, so people just talk, can recommend good films that they've seen, that not always to do with dark histories, but sometimes. For example, I kind of myself sort of teased a little kind of, this week might be a good idea to watch this film, and I posted the trailer of The Witch and things like that. And over Halloween, we obviously did a big kind of horrors that we enjoy and vampire films that we've enjoyed. Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, I posted things like, that this is one of my favourite vampire films. So, we talk about all sorts over there, and it's really nice. Yeah, you can jump on. Everyone's really friendly. Everyone's super nice. It's actually everyone's really, really nice. And when I, started thinking it would be nice to get a little kind of community, I couldn't imagine that it would have been as successful as it has been, and the people being as nice as they have been, and fingers crossed we've had no issues with kind of trolls or anything. So it's a really nice community. So if you want to jump on the Discord, you can head over to darkhistories.com, and all the information's there. It explains it. If you're not sure what it is, it's basically just like an app that's sort of like a private forum, basically. And yeah, that jump on there. Everyone's really friendly. Everyone's really welcoming. If you want to support, that's amazing. We've got Patreon and a coffee. Again, if you just go to darkhistories.com, you'll find all the information about that. It's patreon.com/darkhistories. If you want to go direct to the Patreon and check that out, you get, say, some pretty cool little perks, mostly sort of ad-free versions of the show and early access versions of the show, stickers, postcards, things like that. But in general, you don't have to support. It's obviously a free podcast, but if you do, it really does help. And you get those cool things. Again, in December, I'm going to be taking sort of a month off, sort of just, my yearly kind of annual 2 or 3 weeks off. It'll be from about mid-December till kind of the first week of January. And during that time, say I'll do a kind of Christmas campfire bonus episode. So if you want to get your stories in for that, again, email contact@darkhistories.com, send them in. I'll narrate them and bang out like at least one episode. If we get enough stories, it'll be a couple of episodes, and I'll put them out around Christmas time as a kind of fun Christmas kind of campfire. Because originally, very traditionally, and people sort of forget now, I guess, with Halloween and stuff, Christmas used to be the time to tell ghost stories and creepy stories to each other. So, that's what they did on Christmas Eve, was sit around the fire telling creepy stories. That's why you've got things like Lewis Carroll and Henry James, the Turn of the Screw, things like that. They're all sort of, traditionally sort of when Christmas was a time for telling ghost stories. So that's kind of the idea behind it is, I'll release these kind of Christmas creepy story episodes that will be your guys' creepy stories. So yeah, if you want to send your story in, contact@darkhistories.com. Just let me know if you want it to be anonymous or if you want me to credit you. Either way is totally fine with me, but just let me know. Because if you don't let me know if you want it to be anonymous, I'm not going to give out your email address or anything, but I will just say your first name. If you'd rather keep your first name a secret, just say in the email somewhere, please keep me anonymous, and I'll obviously do that. So yeah, thanks very much for listening. It's been a pleasure as always. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you at the live stream next Saturday or in 2 weeks from now with the next episode. So thanks very much. Take care. Stay safe. Sleep tight.